In fact, I'll say something here that's rather shocking. In September of 2023, last September, I was put on a helicopter by a man who is currently senior operational in these covert programs dealing with UFOs, and flown over two of these black sites. We hovered over one where the Lockheed Skunk Works man-made UFOs come up out of the ground. There are these gigantic things that look like antennas. They're not. They're electromagnetic pulse weapons that are used to create electromagnetic and scalar pulses to test the man-made UFOs, but also just that one site I was over at the Lockheed Skunk Works facility, way out in the desert near Edwards Air Force Base, at least one or two extraterrestrial vehicles are targeted with that weapon and knocked down every year.
Okay, that was Dr. Stephen Greer on Michael Sandler's Inspire Nation YouTube channel. Thanks to Clarity YouTube as well. Dr. Greer is a controversial figure in UFOs, but I'd like to look into more of his scalar weapons. What are scalar weapons? How could that even possibly work? Is it related to zero-point energy? So we'll check out highlights of this interview and really get the basic Stephen Greer argument all in one place. Thanks for being here. Please hit the like button if you do like this content, and subscribe or consider subscribing to get notifications of future videos.
Or the chairs of the Intelligence Committee of the Senate, who are supposed to be read in even to the legal black budget, the super secret black budget. And you make an inquiry into this and you're denied access or you are threatened. They don't regard the laws of any nation or international laws as something they need to obey. Something scarier is that the director who took me there said, and we're in the chopper, he says, and tears came to his eyes. Because he says, when we put up a temporary flight restriction over this area, if a civilian aircraft flies in there, like a private jet or plane, we hit it, and that plane and those people vanish, and no one ever knows what happened to it. Once I learned personally that the director of the CIA and president and people like the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency and the head of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff and senior members and chairmen of committees in the House and Senate were being denied access to and or threatened, then we concluded that these programs are illegal and they cannot use the National Security Act to protect them.
This has been Greer's main claim over decades, is that there is a rogue element global organization that runs all these programs, and they have secret facilities out in the desert. He claims and gives more details here in a minute about how he flew in a helicopter over these sites. I don't know if he actually visited one. Sounds like he did. But that's very similar to what Michael Herrera said in my interview with him. He said that he was escorted by helicopter out to one of these locations, and it was out in the California desert, right? Sounded like near Nevada, so could be near Edwards Air Force Base. Could be the same person, head of this operational covert entity, organization, right? Secret organization that tears up in the helicopter. Michael Herrera said he actually went underground, and he said the most important things on this earth are actually underground. So all the activities going underground. Greer claims that this global illegal organization is keeping information secret from the national apparatus.
This is true of Canada, by the way, also, and Great Britain and other countries. These are meetings that I have been part of. In fact, not only part of, these are at meetings at which I have been the stand-up briefer, the person conducting the briefing. And to hear, someone like a 3-star general, who is the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is the largest military intelligence entity in the planet, be telling me directly that under inquiry, he was denied access and brushed aside. This is when you know things have gone off the rail. This does create a lot of fear, though. Members of Congress know this is dangerous and that there's nobody without sin. So, a lot of these members of Congress know that this group could have dirt on them or what have you, or withhold campaign donations from large aerospace companies. And so they will do their bidding. But we do have a few members of Congress who are taking the charge and are trying to get this through, but it's getting blocked at other levels. And so this is why we need an alternative strategy. This archive is basically the disclosure everyone's asking for. There's a group that has gone under various names. I have a document from the early 1990s that calls them the Majority Joint Intelligence Committee, although it's just under an acronym of MAGIC or MAGI, M-A-J-I or M-A-J-I-C. And it's a global operation, actually. And there are people over the years that I've known who've been involved, like Admiral Bobby Ray Inman and former Vice President Dick Cheney and others. And there are international folks on it. It's very heavily weighted in the private sector, in financial and technology sectors. I remember when I was first asked to come in for the Senate Intelligence Committee folks 2 or 3 years ago and went to a skiff. And I basically said, up above you there is a map of the world. Erase all the geopolitical boundaries. The organization we're dealing with doesn't recognize Canada, U.S., Soviet, Russia, Great Britain. It's the whole world is their operating theater. And they don't regard the laws of any nation or international laws as something they need to obey. So they view themselves, quite frankly, above and beyond conventional society and law.
So Greer argues that the reason an organization like this exists or is able to exist, maybe needed to exist, is because the underlying technology is so dangerous that it could totally upend the entire global order. So the group is essentially required just to maintain global order.
It's a very powerful group. Why would it have such power? Well, it's sitting on technologies that are thousands of years from the future that would immediately get us off of oil and gas and coal and the petrodollar and fossil fuels and surface roads and public utilities. And we're talking more than $1,000 trillion in assets would go the way of horse and buggies, right? So that is the problem. It's a massive macroeconomic issue. Why did a group in the 1950s seize power away from President Eisenhower and turn this into an illegal black project? 1961, he said, beware the military-industrial complex because it will be a threat to our democracy and way of life. And the reason he said that, which he didn't put into the speech, but we know now from people who worked with him, whose testimony was that he was in favor of moving forward with peaceful contact with the ETs and disclosing at least the technologies that would benefit humanity safely. Not necessarily the things that fly, because those can be a missile system, but the things that would run your house or your car or whatever without pollution and by the way, free, no energy bills. And Eisenhower was a 5-star general. When he made that speech, it's not like it was Abby Hoffman, radical hippie who was opposed to the military. He was a World War II hero and a 5-star general. Most people don't know the history of why he became so depressed and so despondent towards the end of his administration. It's because between 1956 and 1960, a group of folks decided to seize control over these projects and decapitate the presidency and other people who wouldn't go along with their agenda. And that's still the case. 60 years on, it's exactly the same as it was in the late 50s, early 60s. I have a member of my team who is the most senior scientist at the Naval Research Labs, who was out there on an operation at Dugway Proving Grounds, and they were out there late at night with night scopes, and out of the ground comes this massive triangular silent craft. And it was one built by Northrop Grumman or Raytheon, man-made, totally free energy and totally anti-gravity, quote unquote. And we know that that's what's going on out there. There are both extraterrestrial vehicles they're studying and man-made ones that can be deployed from there. And it's a very large research and development area now.
Okay, so amazing claim by Greer there. He says he has a member of his team who's the most senior scientist at the Naval Research Labs, and he was out on an operation at Dugway Proving Grounds at night with night scopes, and the man personally saw a massive triangular craft come out of the ground. And we'll get to it in a minute, but he says totally free energy and totally anti-gravity, quote unquote.
52% of that range is owned and run by private corporate contractors and only 48% by government. And the reason it's structured that way is that if someone does a FOIA request, they're not going to get anything. It's all sitting in the corporate world. It's the tail is wagging the dog here. The big corporate interests have done this shell game and smoke and mirrors to be able to hide what's going on so that even senior people in government don't know what it is. And the corporations can claim proprietary privilege.
This was a main argument for why the UAP Disclosure Act was gutted, essentially. The argument is Michael Turner, who's the congressional member for Wright Pat Air Force Base, that area, is also the chair of the Armed Services Committee. And he receives a large amount of money from defense contractors. He shot down the UAP Disclosure Act. So the argument is it was shot down by the defense contractors. They didn't like the language in there, especially eminent domain. Eminent domain means any NHI material, potentially NHI material, belongs to the government. So any defense contractor holding NHI material would immediately be liable to turn that in. So that was a main argument, is that that's why it was shot down, because the defense contractors have the materials, they have the actual operations under their purview, and they didn't want the government stealing their stuff. So that's why they shut it down.
Back in the 90s, there was a Congressman, Christopher Cox from Orange County. I briefed in his offices. He said, well, where are these places? So I started putting together a list, and also a list of the corporations. And we came across the ones, like for the ones that are building underground covert facilities and deep underground bases and tunnels between those bases, crisscrossing out west all over, Bechtel Corporation and HIT Construction. Then I found that there were which aerospace companies had what facilities where. So we learned that Northrop Grumman, ironically, my uncle who worked on the lunar module had his whole career with Northrop Grumman, and also Lockheed Skunk Works, a division of Boeing. And also there are divisions with Ford and General Motors that have worked on these programs, General Electric, Raytheon, EG&G. There's a whole list. You'll see the names of the corporations and where some of the key facilities are, where the R&D is going on, including out in the desert of California, Nevada, Utah, and elsewhere. So we know where all these are. We have sources and methods to pinpoint those.
So Greer is referring to his disclosure effort. They just released many, many gigabytes of these documents on his website. Link is in the description to access that website. You have to sign up, etc. I haven't seen the list actually, but according to Greer, they have all the locations of these places, as well as all the corporations. All the information that should lead to disclosure is in that document release. And now Greer will talk about how he actually went to one of these facilities, at least flew in a helicopter with the person in charge of the operation at that facility. Let's listen to this.
In fact, I'll say something here that's rather shocking. In September of 2023, last September, I was put on a helicopter by a man who is currently senior operational in these covert programs dealing with UFOs, and flown over two of these black sites. We hovered over one where the Lockheed Skunk Works man-made UFOs come up out of the ground. Now, people go, how the hell did you get there? Now, if you look at the environment right around this facility, there are these gigantic things that look like antennas. They're not. They're electromagnetic pulse weapons that are used to create electromagnetic and scalar pulses to test the man-made UFOs, but also just that one site I was over at the Lockheed Skunk Works facility, way out in the desert near Edwards Air Force Base, at least one or two extraterrestrial vehicles are targeted with that weapon and knocked down every year. So if you look at our crash retrieval section, you'll see there's something like 130 plus crash retrieval cases, but that's probably less than 10% of the ones that have happened. where we have targeted them with these advanced directional energy weapons, or DOEs, using very high tech, faster than the speed of light technology. A scalar weapon is faster than a normal light wave or electromagnetic signal. And they don't hit them every day, but this one place I was over is 1 or 2 killed ET craft a year.
Okay, so that is just an amazing claim by Dr. Greer there. He said the man he's with is a senior operational leader, essentially, manager of the site. And then he talks about actual antennas at the site that are using scalar waves, advanced directional energy weapon systems to take these UFOs down, right? To actually down them and for the crash retrieval program. So could this even be possible? What is a scalar wave? I found this very interesting paper released in 2003 from the CIA. It says Star Wars Now, the Bohm Aharonov Effect, Scalar Interferometry and Soviet Weaponization by T.E. Bearden, April 24th, 1984. So I'm not going to go through the whole paper, obviously, unless you guys want it in the comments. But basically, it talks about scalar electromagnetics, wireless transmission of energy at a distance. Characteristics of a scalar wave beam. So a scalar wave is a longitudinal wave. It does not use normal Hertzian waves. Tesla talked about non-Hertzian waves, right? They could go through the Earth without slowing down at all. So if you can access vacuum theory, right? So we're talking about related to 0-point energy. And you can transmit energy using these scalar waves across space. We'll just show here in a second. Then you could weaponize it. This paper argues that the Soviets actually did many tests called cold explosions, whose goal was actually to weaponize this technology and even use it for weather engineering. So pretty amazing. Okay, from the abstract, the Bohm-Aharonov effect shows that even in the absence of electrical and magnetic fields, the potentials cause real effects to occur in the field-free region. So this could be where there's no electric or magnetic field. There is still an effect, right? There's still basically a force, energy, if you will. Even though there's no electric or magnetic fields there, could that be 0-point? And the Bohm-Aharonov effect, sometimes called the Ehrenberg-Sidey-Aharonov-Bohm effect, is a quantum mechanical phenomenon in which an electrically charged particle is affected by an electromagnetic potential, despite being confined to a region in which both the magnetic field and the electric field are zero. So this has been proven. So even though you have an electrically charged particle there, even though there's no magnetic field and no electric field where the particle is, it's still affected by the electromagnetic potential. And the effect really goes against the principle of locality, meaning the universe is not local. New scientists called this effect one of the 7 wonders of the quantum world. So it's a measured quantum effect. So what this means is, using this principle, beams of pure potential without vector force fields, so without electric or magnetic fields, may be deliberately produced and intersected at a distance to cause effects in the interference zone. In contradiction to classical mechanics, these effects are in fact required by quantum mechanics. So you'll see here in a diagram, it's the intersection of pure potential without force fields. Essentially, energy may be produced directly at the distance interference site or extracted from it without energy transmission through space. What am I thinking? Like space-based lasers? Could the Tic Tac have been produced by something like this? Could it actually have been some sort of scalar wave effect? Implications for weapons built on these concepts are given, and several types of such scalar electromagnetics weapons are discussed. Yeah, small from you can handhold to all the way up to like nuclear-sized event, mushroom cloud affecting the weather. The use of the cold explosion is detailed, and evidence of its extensive testing is given. The basic mechanism for Soviet weather control over North America is briefly presented in a more extensive reference given. Evidence of massive Soviet weaponization of these effects for nearly 3 decades and of Soviet scalar electromagnetics weapons testing on a global scale exists in the open literature. Selected examples and related information are given in the appendix. Again, you can read the whole paper, link in the description. So a scalar field is a function associating a single number to every point in space. In a physical context, scalar fields are required to be independent of the choice of the reference frame. That is, any two observers using the same units will agree on the value of the scalar field at the same absolute point in space or spacetime, regardless of their respective points of origin. This seems counterintuitive to me, or against what you would think is theory of relativity, right? General relativity. Examples used in physics include the temperature distribution throughout space, the pressure distribution in a field, and, critical here, spin zero quantum fields, such as the Higgs field. These fields are the subject of scalar field theory. So the Higgs field, which quantum mechanics, quantum theory is basically based on now, is a scalar field theory. So think about that. So this is how it would work, right? Wireless transmission of energy at a distance. To illustrate one remarkable, though typical, implication of this new breakthrough area, we point out that by changing the potentials while keeping the force field zero, one can directly produce energy at a distance as if it were transported through space without losses, even though no energy transmission through space in the normal fashion occurs as such. Indeed, it may even be possible to utilize pure potential waves to transport the energy at any velocity not limited by the speed of light, since in some cases a potential, for example electrostatic scalar potential, can be regarded as having infinite velocity, simply appearing everywhere at once. This is somewhat analogous to putting energy in here and extracting it out there without any travel or losses in between. Nikola Tesla's old wireless transmission of energy at a distance without losses idea. Note that, quantum mechanically, we may take the view that this is a very special class of macroscopic energy tunneling phenomena, as illustrated in Aharonov-Bohm's original paper. Essentially, energy is put into the system at the locations where the scalar potentials are produced, and is recovered at the distance interference zone where particle effects are produced. And so this would basically be what they're arguing in this paper, how it would work, creating energy at a distance. So you have one scalar transmitter in one location, aiming its beam, right, of scalar waves. And then you have a second scalar transmitter some distance away, aiming its beam to intersect with the other beam. And so what you will have is a energy bottle, they call it, an area of energy. Think of it like the double slit experiment. It's basically you're sending waves out of one transmitter, waves out of another, and where they actually interfere with each other is going to cause that energy to reappear as particles, kind of like a double slit experiment to make the particles appear. And it sounds like this is being sent through some propagation of the vacuum state, right? Whatever the Higgs field is, it's transmitting through that. And this made me think, could it be the tic tac? Could you have basically one scalar transmitter in a submarine, and then you have another scalar transmitter either on the same submarine, right, shooting here to create some sort of object, although the tic tac looked very smooth on the outside. I imagine this would just be an energy blob. But this could be like a geometric shape, maybe what we're seeing. You could also have one of these at a further distance, right? Who knows how far it can go? Could you have a satellite, actually a scalar transmitter, and then you have a ground-based scalar transmitter there that actually could do intersection to be used as a weapon here, right? So if you have an anti-ballistic missile coming, you just aim your beams there. You're not shooting lasers propagating energy through the atmosphere now. You're just having the energy appear right at that location. So it could be an invisible way to actually take down missiles, some sort of defensive system. Back to Greer.
Something scarier is that the director who took me there said, and we're in the chopper, he says, and tears came to his eyes. Because he says, when we put up a temporary flight restriction over this area, if a civilian aircraft flies in there, like a private jet or plane, we hit it, and that plane and those people vanish, and no one ever knows what happened to them. It's a missing plane, missing person account. Even sometimes when people are outside the temporary flight restriction area, the beam of this weapon will go out too far and hit an aircraft. And he has personally retrieved them. He has personally retrieved the bodies of the ETs and craft and these innocent civilians who have been killed. Now, this is a scandalous situation. We're talking murder going on now, right now. And those kind of facilities, by the way, exist all over the world. Australia, down under. I know what the technologies are and I know what they're capable of. And I also know that sometimes these covert programs are trying to hit and retrieve an extraterrestrial vehicle to study it, and they will inadvertently hit a civilian aircraft. And of course, that gets covered up or whatever. Or in the case of this one site, there's no trace. We're talking incineration of both the human bodies and the human aircraft to powder. There's nothing there. Unfortunately, there are people who are wondering what happened to their family members flying on a private plane out in certain areas that have vanished, that have never been found. Well, now we know where they are. They're nowhere, but we know what happened.
Okay, so amazing claims from Stephen Greer. Basically says that he was with the man who personally went and retrieved bodies of the ETs, of the craft, and of innocent civilians who have been killed. That is just amazing to me. We still haven't heard that person come out. They haven't made public yet. I still haven't heard any updates on the book. It sounds like this is the same person that took Michael Herrera out to the desert, showed him at least one of these facilities, it sounds like. And that same person told Greer that he's actually personally recovered dead ET bodies and craft. That is just amazing. Supposedly the book that they were writing, The Insiders, is still waiting to be approved by Dopser. And so we'll see if that comes out hopefully soon, hopefully this year. Be amazing to get some new breakthroughs. If Dr. Greer is telling the truth, Michael Herrera is telling the truth, sounds like they could be, then we're in for a really interesting rest of the year. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps and it's free. Consider subscribing to get future notifications of when I release videos. And you might like this video. If you want to support the channel, join these great people over here, get exclusive bonus content, then click this button here, patreon.com/Chris Lato, or become a YouTube member. If you want to continue the discussion, go to UAP Society Discord. Links are all in the description. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.